He left the seat of CTO at Adobe before ChatGPT launched because he saw something coming that very few people saw. This is the founder and CEO of Typeface, Abhay Parasnis.
And then I guess that brings to the last and the current chapter, which started in 2022, where I got excited about AI. This is a year before the ChatGPT moment, if you will. So now it feels very different sitting here. But I got early glimpses of what was kind of happening with DALL-E and GPT and felt like this is going to be a massive inflection point in every single category. And so I left in 2022, early 22, to start this company, Typeface.
Next, we dug into how product market fit changes as a concept when AI is changing the ground every month.
I don't think the notion of product market fit as traditionally defined. It feels more like a continuous recalc your assumptions against the model and evolve.
Then we hit upon something that marketers will relate to, what Abhay calls AI slop, when AI generates things without context.
In a nutshell, I could have said Typeface entire pitch to a customer is we are your anti-slop kind of a recipe. Because what I mean by that is use basic ChatGPT, Claude, or Google Gemini, or Nano Banana. All these are amazing models. But the problem is they cannot be discriminate about your particular business, your product, your taxonomy.
Here's where it gets tactical. How to go from pilots to big lighthouse projects in complex big enterprises.
It is not enough for the C-level to just say, we must adopt AI, mandate it on the organization, and then go away and 6 months later be shocked like when nothing has happened. Pick a narrow use case. See, this is where the AI hype doesn't help. Let's start with a crawl, walk, run. Let's pick one use case. Let's actually deliver.
And finally, the mindset behind it all. The beginner's mindset, keeping your learning VO2 max high.
The Japanese word for it, which is shoshin, or which is kind of the beginner's mind. There's this whole VO2 max, like what is your oxygen holding capacity? A VO2 max equivalent measure for your learning capacity.
Right, so we have a very special guest today, Abhay Parasnis, who's done some amazing things in his career. He was the CTO of Adobe before starting his really hot startup in AI space called Typeface. And he's one of the world's leading experts on how to apply AI in the marketing space. So hope to learn a lot from him. Thank you so much for doing this. Welcome, Abhay.
Great to be here, Amit. Good to do this with you.
Yeah. So maybe we can start with introducing everyone to kind of your background and your journey a little bit. And we don't have to go through the entire arc, but like a few things that really stood out for you as you look back and you feel like those were defining moments. Would love to hear about that.
Yeah, no. I mean, first, fun to be doing this with you, and you obviously have a fascinating journey, and Dheeraj and I obviously go back a long ways as well. So fun to do this with you. Look, I think as you said, I don't think I want to bore everyone with kind of the standard LinkedIn version of the journey. What I'll just say is, look, there are probably like you have, we have done amazing different things. There's probably three chapters if I look back in some ways, or three moments of kind of starting all over again, if you will, or the beginner's mind. I know you guys in the podcast talk a lot about curiosity. And so for me, there are really three chapters. Chapter one, hardcore product guy, started really on the engineering and coming up through the engineering side, and was fortunate enough to be at the right place, right time when internet/Java broke out. And I was fortunate enough, didn't even know Java project didn't even have a name at that time. And there was a project nobody wanted to work on. I was at IBM, got enlisted to go work on something, and that became a core part of the Java 1.0 stack with the Java Beans technology. So this is like when you are completely ignorant and you don't really choose a career choices, you just go with the flow. But that was an amazing journey to work with some amazing people. And as you know, Java, when it broke out, I just happened to end up getting sucked into the internet and Java kind of wave. From there, went to a startup called I2, which some people may remember. It was like late 90s. It was a pretty hot kind of
Really hot
supply
startup.
chain.
Yeah.
Yeah, Siebel, I2, Ariba were kind of pre-dot-com bust in the dot-com cycle. But anyway, that was a fun journey. Chapter two was at Microsoft, and that was like a decade at Microsoft. It was a fun journey there, really, as the company kind of went through different chapters of their own kind of business evolution. Worked, as you said, what was the most seminal or learning moments? One of the fun or best parts of that journey. Bill was still pretty active in the company. And one of the first projects I ended up working on was something he was personally driving. And it was very intense to work with him, which was a kind of a building a business process workflow engine for across all Microsoft products. A
Yeah.
completely fun journey, lots of fun memories. But then was really fortunate enough to be part of the Azure version one kind of as kind of the company transformed to the cloud. Ray Ozzie was leading the cloud transformation, and so was part of Ray's team, early team, to kind of really build their consumer cloud kind of transformation, as well as then eventually what became Azure there. Then the chapter was Adobe, which is really kind of I would say the chapter of cloud transformation and really going through existing businesses with amazing products like Photoshop and Acrobat with millions of, and in fact I joined Adobe because I was a passionate user of
Yeah.
Lightroom. And so that was really the transformation of the company from on-prem to cloud, both in technical sense as well as commercial sense. And so around 8 years there was a completely fun ride, amazing company. I mean, not just amazing company in terms of the products, but the people and the culture. Learned a lot. And then I guess that brings to the last and the current chapter, which started in 2022, where I got excited about AI. This is a year before the Chat GPT moment, if you will. So now it feels very different sitting here.
Yeah.
But I got early glimpses of what was kind of happening with DALI and GPT and felt like this is going to be a massive inflection point in every single
Mm.
category. And actually, and frankly, Dheeraj, I know is not here, but I lots of close friends like Dheeraj, Bipul at Rubrik had gone through entrepreneurial journey you have gone through. And I was like, look, I don't want to have a regret that I saw something big happening and didn't take the plunge to do an entrepreneurial journey. And so I
Mm.
left in 2022, early 22,
Mm.
to start this company, Typeface.
Very cool. And it's a pretty gutsy move, right? Like CTO of Adobe is kind of pretty high up there in terms of corporate ladder and giving that and going back to ground zero. What was the moment when you were able to make that decision? The excitement of building something in startup is always there, but then there is also like giving up um, where you are.
Yeah, yeah, no, I mean, first of all, I don't know, gutsy is the word. A lot of other people had other words, reckless, stupid, other words that they try to tell me that I should or should not do. As you know, lots of people, by the way, Dheeraj was quite helpful in the early as I kind of went, he had gone through obviously Nutanix and had just started DevRev. So I was like, hey,
Mm.
what motivates somebody like you who has already had such a phenomenal success to start all over again? Or Bipul had gone from venture to starting Rubrik. So
Mm.
first, I would say it is very helpful. And I think as other people think about it, having these people who have gone through the journey and share their experiences is actually quite valuable and influential, I must say.
Mm.
And that's actually a unique thing about Valley. I think people do actually engage and share their journeys. But to your point, look, part of it, I think we and you are like this. We have been fortunate, which is, yes, at one level, walking away from a big company, C-level job in an amazing company to starting from scratch with nobody and no product, it is risky. But frankly, I also want to be realistic. At our stages in career, like where you have had a big success under your belt, I think it was a slightly easier decision other than maybe the ego and the emotional risk of like, oh, well, what if you fail and what others may think. I think financially and otherwise, it's actually an easier risk at this stage in
Mm.
career than a lot
Yeah.
of entrepreneurs who take a lot more risky moves early in their career. So I don't think that was as much a big issue for me. I think I'll tell you in a weird way, Amit, which changed when ChatGPT happened. The bigger risk was I had the conviction that this is a big shift, but none of the technologies were necessarily available at that time. So,
Mhm.
in fact, when I started the company, not a single model was openly available for somebody to build a company on. And in
Mm.
fact, the only two models I could use were only available under licenses that you couldn't use it for commercial use.
Mm,
So it was kind of more about you have this exciting idea and vision, but you don't necessarily have all the pieces and platforms needed to build it yet. And so
mm,
I think
mm,
in some ways that, and like then the other key component is who are the people you are going to bet on to go on this
mm,
journey. So those, I would say, those were the two, maybe the more kind of important things to go through the journey. I think
mm,
frankly, the risk aspect, I was also ready. I mean, look, I had done 20 years of big company. I think good or bad, whatever reputation I had built, people knew me as the big company guy. And I was
mm.
like, okay, let's see if you can prove to yourself first that you can do this in a completely different way.
And like no matter what you have done, product market fit is always a hard grind. It um, sometimes you're lucky and you find it within few months, and sometimes it takes years. How was the journey like for you? And like, what were the important lessons that you could impart to somebody else as they are on their journey to find product market fit?
No, would love to talk about that. But if I may, I know we said we'll keep it pretty fluid. I actually have a question for you on the previous one
Yeah.
before we go to the product market fit. I mean, you're kind of on your own journey of that, having done a successful and a massively successful thing and now starting kind of all over again. Is it different second time around? Like, I mean, you've clearly done the success. Like, what is it for you right now? Because you are kind of in that journey.
Yeah, it's been a very different journey. Uh, and in many different ways. So I think one of my friends, Sanjay, who's the CEO of Redefining, says that there's a thin line between bravery and bravado. It's just about kind of navigating that line. When we started Hotspot, I I was just like a researcher slash engineer at Google, and I had literally zero idea about this enterprise world, and just a strong desire to do something amazing. And so when I saw Ajit wanted to do this, I just jumped in with him, and I was like, let's find the hardest engineering problems and solve them. And somehow magically, everything else should take care of itself. Fortunately, Ajit had more sense than me. So he was the one who had looked at the market, decided that we are going to go in the analytics space. Um, we had kind of other co-founders who, like, we're talking about natural language as the interface, but also
You guys
keeping
were way
trust as,
ahead. I mean, it's kind of funny.
yeah.
You were way ahead. That's kind of where the world now came to with LLMs and ChatGPT.
Yeah, yeah. That was back in 2012. And I think I did my part of like figuring out how to build a solution that was available with the technology back then. But I can take zero credit in like finding product market fit, building a GTM machinery and stuff like that. A few years into the company, I did get involved in the GTM side and then got a lot more exposure and understanding. But initially, I was like, my job is to take the product definition that we're going after and just build the technology that enables it. This time around, from the CEO seat, it's a very different thing. And the other thing is, because of all the various pivots we had to go through, like we didn't realize cloud in time. We didn't realize early on that we should have focused as much on analyst persona as the business user. Um, this time, I really wanted to not be insight driven and more talk to customers and see what problems they have and solve that. And I almost went to the other extreme of like, world, tell me what should I be doing? And like, I just have amazing technology team and I'll build it. And I kind of wandered around for about a year in that mode and realized
I remember
that's,
talking to you, yeah, early
yeah,
on.
that's another terrible way of building a company. And so like then started getting more and more specific about whose problem and what customers and
Yeah, so
what
that's
narrow
great.
vertical.
Back to your product market fit, because that's a good segue to kind of what you were
Yeah.
asking. Look, first, I don't know. I don't know if I even have a ability to say that I have some advice or anything. I maybe I have
Mm,
some observations and kind of it's kind
mhm,
of what I'm living through. So this is
mm,
maybe one of those where this particular topic, I don't even think, and I've talked to some of the other founders and people who have scaled. I'm not sure if it's something fundamentally different, but it feels like the concept of a product market fit as a stable point in time construct. I don't think it even exists right now with AI.
mm, mm,
And
mm,
it's a more of a fluid, continuous optimization function, if you will,
mm,
where
mm,
the rate of change of technology, and I was just sharing this with somebody else I spoke with a few weeks back, which is, I'll just give you one anecdote. We started our company 2022, came out of stealth kind of a year later. We launched our first product, give or take around May of 23. By May of 24, which was last year, so roughly a year in, and that product got some awards and recognition as being the best marketing AI product of the year by Time Magazine and stuff. So on paper, we were doing really well, being on the leading edge. And yet internally, we were like, we have to completely rewrite this thing because the underlying technology that we started with 2 years ago with basic prompts and basic models versus this agentic reasoning and the now what you have at your disposal with full reasoning capabilities, we were like, shit, this is completely different step function change in the capability, and you don't want to keep duct taping kind of on a stack that you already can see. You have to completely build a
mm,
different thing. So my point, Amit, there is, I'm actually, and we are living through this. I would love your observation. I don't think there is a find a product market fit and just keep scaling that indefinitely is yet at least a reality in the AI world that we are in, which is
mm,
both the technology on one side is changing so fast that even if you
mm,
are a market leading product today, you may be completely legacy irrelevant stack within a year if you don't
mm,
modernize and keep up. So that's the
mm,
product technology side. But the customer side, which is what you talked about, is equally fascinating because customers, at least for us, what we found is they were initially just overwhelmed with all this stuff coming with ChatGPT. Every day there is some new thing happening. And
mm,
while they were very eager and excited, their internal change management or organizational capability to even absorb any of this stuff is
mm,
like a fraction of the rate at which the technology is moving. So you have this interesting paradox. The tech is moving at probably 100x faster than any previous technology shift,
mm,
but the required change management in the organization is significantly higher with AI than I actually think the previous one, even cloud, was. Because cloud, at the end of the day, yeah, IT teams had to change, understand security, understand some network configurations differently, but there wasn't a fundamental rethinking of the jobs. And it
mhm,
wasn't
mm.
like the IT person was, oh, if I move this to the cloud, half of my org will be completely fired tomorrow. I think, yeah, there was some economic aspect, but the
Yeah.
genuine. So I think those two. So net of all that is, I don't think the notion of product market fit as traditionally defined, I
Mm,
don't think we are even experiencing. I don't know what the new word is. Maybe somebody will come up with a cool term. Is it feels more like a continuous recalc. It's almost
mhm.
like, since we are talking about AI, it's exactly like the fine tuning and where you have to constantly back propagate through the weights, new data. It feels like that's the world we are in. You constantly have to test your assumptions against the model
Yeah.
and evolve.
Tell me a little bit, like, let's drill down into that. Like, how did you experience that on the customer side? Like, on technology side, I completely understand. Like, things change every month.
Yeah.
But on the customer side, how are you experiencing, like, oh, we had sort of product market fit, and now we don't, unless we build the next generation of product or something like that.
Yeah, there are a couple of things I can think of. First, and it's even which customer do you start with? So when
Yeah.
we launched, because there's so much hype, and not about typeface, just broadly AI,
Yeah.
we got a pretty indiscriminate sampling of 8 to 10,000 companies who signed up on our website. And at one level, emotionally, that's like, wow, that's great. We got like all these companies. Then we looked at the list of those companies, and you had some of the biggest Fortune 50, Fortune 100 brands exploring, And then you
mm,
had a super small agency with two people who wanted to use AI. So first, I
mm,
think first aspect of that, Amit, I would say, is even us knowing which of these customers are just mildly curious versus which of these customers actually are going to have a genuine transformation mindset with AI,
mm,
and
mm,
importantly, are going to have the budget and the capacity to go transform. So I would say
mm,
first for us was a very hard and a painful decision. I'll give you an example because there's so much pressure slash expectation in the valley correctly is like PLG, and you just have to have a product that everyone will just start using and give you feedback. In our case, we recently took a painful but a controversial decision to in fact remove our online self-serve product because the customer base that we have actually really figured out who really wants to work with us, use us, is some of the largest enterprises. And if
mm,
that's the case, then those self-serve trials were actually becoming a little bit of a distraction than actually helping us. So
mm,
that's an example at one level. But maybe the second question you asked, like how did we even decide? And this is something we are actively working through, by the way, now. We started working with marketers because our product is focused on marketing.
mm,
And we realized the CMO and the C level is super excited about the AI.
mm,
But the practitioner is really very concerned because they don't know how to use it. They don't know if this means losing their job a year from now. And so part of the product market fit for us wasn't even about the technology, as you said, but it's
mm,
really understanding the internal organizational dynamics, how they have to change their processes, what
mm,
people genuinely are afraid of adopting this AI. And so
mm,
today now we have an offering where we offer a set of services to help them through that change management that's nothing to do with the tech,
mm,
and we
mm,
never had that offering. And that's not even a traditional, by the way, all this forward deployment, every company, AI company is talking about. For
mm,
us, a notion of this forward deployment is that partnering with these companies to even figure out how to adopt these technologies, what job functions have to change in what way. So that's an
mm.
example which was never on our radar that we had to go acquire and build in the last 1 year.
Ah, interesting. Let's talk a little bit about what does Typeface do for the customers, uh, and make it more specific.
Yeah. So, in a simplest terms, and I know you and your audience probably is pretty AI savvy, so I'll just
Mm,
keep it in the simplest terms. The bet we are making is that these large platforms, the Gen AI foundation, whether it's LLM text or video,
mm,
image, that the platforms are going to continue to get better and better in their raw compute slash raw capability to compress global knowledge
mm,
into these highly distilled systems.
mm,
And so what we are betting on is, can we build on these horizontal broad platforms to go very vertically deep in a
mm,
marketing domain specifically?
mm,
And
mm,
within marketing domain, can we allow companies, whether you are a B2B brand or a B2C brand, to ingest your proprietary content and data on top of these base platforms and highly personalize these models to speak your brand's language, your product taxonomy, your customer journey, the words you care
mm,
to use about your brand. And so, what we
mm,
focused on is building a multi-channel marketing platform. And by multi-channel,
mm,
we mean email, web, social media platform. And
mm,
our core value proposition, Amit, for customers is, instead of using the generic AI platforms, we will
mm,
train on your brand, your products, your customer
mm,
data, and the
mm,
output as a result of these AI systems can be deeply personalized
mm,
at scale, which is the holy
mm.
grail in marketing. Can I
Yeah,
do
yeah, yeah.
personalization at scale? That's kind of really
Mm,
what we are essentially enabling some of the biggest
mm,
brands in B2B and B2C to go after.
mm, mm. So this term AI slop has gotten around quite a bit, right? And this is what happens when you don't have enough context.
Yes.
It's not that these models are not brilliant. They're just like they represent the median.
Yes.
Right? So how do you get around the AI slop and the context engineering problem?
Well, that right there, and it's interesting you use that term. In a nutshell, I could have said Typeface entire pitch to a customer is, we are your anti-slop kind of a recipe. Because what I mean by that is, if we just use basic ChatGPT, Claude, or Google Gemini, or Nano Banana, all these are amazing models and getting better and better every week.
mm,
But the problem is they cannot be discriminate about your particular business, your product, your taxonomy, or even within the same company. The same company wants to speak different ways in different markets. Like you don't want the
mm,
North American marketing campaign to look the same as what you're doing in India or Australia.
mm,
So what our pitch entire thing is exactly what you said, is ingest extremely high quality context. Give us
mm,
your brand document. So one of the things we do is some of the biggest brands we work with, they have hundreds of pages of brand documents that have codified over decades what their brand values are. And
mm,
these are very subtle in some ways and very explicit in other ways. But these are PDF documents that no software currently understands. And so what we
mm,
do is we ingest your brand documents and we train a brand agent. Essentially, think of it as a chat GPT built specifically only to speak your brand.
mm, mm, mm,
And all we do is do extreme amount of context injection,
mm,
extract brand rules about your business, but then we ask a human in the loop where we say to a marketer, did our AI extract the rules right? Do we think we got your brand right? Because at the end of the day, Amit, this is also a very human creative endeavor. It's not just like
mm,
a, I think we are very different than a lot of what customer support AI companies are doing. Because
mm,
in customer support, you have these workflows that you can automate and you can just train an agent. In our
mm,
case, it's more that nuance and creativity. So the marketer
mm,
will
mm,
always have a say. Yeah, you got all the rules right technically, but here's a subtle variation in how we like to talk to a Gen Z audience on a specific campaign. And so it's a very iterative process of context injection and then a
mm,
human correction. Like where
mm,
the
mm,
user will say, no, 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 you didn't get it right. And our entire product's goal is allowing those customers to narrow that funnel, if you will. Like the if we
mm,
can let the human marketer dial in their creativity in their mind to what the brand learning is,
mm,
that is the holy grail.
mm, mm, mm. And what's hard about it? Is it the engineering of it? And what specifically in engineering is it the like narrowing down the right product emphasis and decisions? Is it the way?
Yeah, it's a great question. And like anything else, I would tell you again, I think we are still in our learning journey. So I want to be
Yeah.
careful about not making definitive statements of learning that's complete. I think it's still
Hmm.
a journey. But I do think there are two things we are clearly seeing as what's hard, to your point.
Mm,
First,
mm,
I think the notion of brand
mm,
historically has been very ephemeral and unstructured. Like if you look at what
mm,
happened, because you obviously with your ThoughtSpot and journey, you guys were all about unstructured kind of. So if you look at like systems like Snowflake, Databricks, or all the CDPs or data platforms over decades, or even databases before that, they have all been about schematizing and representing word in a highly structured way.
mm,
Brand is one of those things which is extremely emotionally high in its content, but it's
mm,
extremely unstructured in its digital representation.
mm,
And so, one of the hardest things we struggle with customers is how do you go from something that's very ephemerally represented in tribal knowledge, in documents, in how they think about the brand. I'll give you a fun example. We'll start working with a champion in a
mm,
client, and he or she may be their senior most person. They said, I will work with you to really train our brand in your AI system. And then we
mm,
go back and forth, let's say for 4 6 weeks, they give us documents, we train, then he or she will review the output and say, no, 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 you are still not getting it right, it still feels robotic, whatever. Then
mm,
eventually we dial it in and convert, and then the champion will say, this is amazing, this is now perfectly dialed in. Now
mm,
let's go do a broader review with the rest of the team.
mm,
And we go into a review with the team, and within 5 minutes the focus shifts from not even whether the software got it right to the marketers debating amongst themselves, is this even our brand? Like this shouldn't even be our brand. And
yeah.
it shifts from a technology to a core creative and a process discussion. So first hard part of it is guiding companies and customers to really get brand represented in a highly structured, highly schematized, highly knowledge representation that everyone converges on. So it is actually
mm,
as much a social engineering problem as it is a technical
mm,
engineering
mm,
problem
mm, mm,
on that side. And then there is some real workflow problems. Maybe the second thing I'll say, once you dial it in, the hard technical problem, Amit, that we are trying to solve is how to break the marketing silos that exist today, where you have a different system and technology to do email campaigns, and a different system to do your web content, and a different system to
mm,
do. And as these agentic reasoning systems are becoming stronger and smarter, we are fundamentally trying to build a system which is truly a cross-channel
mm,
system, where a marketer doesn't have to run campaigns one channel at a time, and it's almost
mm,
like a single pane of glass where you can do the
mm,
whole marketing left to right. And so there
mm,
are some pretty exciting technical problems in that. But I
mm,
would say, if you ask me, the first one is the harder one,
mm,
the
mm. Yeah,
social
yeah,
engineering
yeah,
problem.
yeah, yeah. I think as an engineer, I've realized I always underestimate the change management and the social engineering part of building a company and building distribution.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. Very cool. And I wonder what you brought from your experience from Adobe and Microsoft, this proving to be a huge asset. And are there things that you consider a liability that you're trying to unlearn and things like that?
That's a great question. And that is a great question. That is something I spent a lot of time when I was starting,
Mm,
trying to be intentional as much as I could in the moment of what do I want to make sure I don't lose, and what do
mm,
I make sure I create a clean beginner's mind to start all over again.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and I'm not sure how successful I have been at it, but I will tell you at least what I analytically and intellectually had analyzed.
Hmm.
I think when you are in these big companies and companies like
Mm,
Microsoft, Adobe, that are world class,
yeah.
two things you sometimes take for granted. One, the amazing just concentration of talent that these
Mm,
companies acquire over time,
mm,
and the average bar of what you assume a kind of a professional bar just is, when you, because if you
mm,
spend 10 years like I did at Microsoft and then
mm,
almost 8 years at Adobe, that's
mm,
18 years of working with some of the best people who were attracted to those places. That doesn't mean
mm,
other people, there are no smart people outside, but the problem is the average bar of competency and average bar of what you consider, you get sometimes skewed. And so, one, I would
mm,
say it was an interesting thing that I did not fully appreciate, but it's also an asset because you build relationships and you can then rely on that network of people and the talent that
mm,
is willing to kind of follow you down a blind alley. So
mm,
that is an advantage. I would say the second advantage in my case specifically,
mm,
and we have tried to do this in Typeface, is the power and value of partnerships and ecosystems. So when you're a
mm,
big company, especially Microsoft,
mm,
they have a deep ingrained partnership DNA just historically, because they've always built platforms and lots of ISVs have built on their platforms. And so from day one, I felt like even as a startup, which is not usual, because a lot of people say don't worry about partnership, that's a waste of time when
mm,
you're a small company, just focus on your thing. We
mm,
actually went down a different path from day one. Microsoft and Google, we approached them, they became investors in the company, they were deep partners for us. And so we are very comfortable with all the pros and cons of betting on partnerships as
mm,
a way to build both the product and the business. And then
mm,
Salesforce actually also became a large investor and a partner. So I would say, Amit, the thing I did bring with me, maybe not very consciously, is the power of platforms and ecosystems, that you have to build a broad platform play over time. Now, you can't start
mm,
there as a startup. You got to start with specific use case. And then unlearning part. Look, I think the two things I was very worried about. One, there's a lot of things you learn in these
mm,
companies that may not be globally true knowledge, but really only works in those companies.
mm, mm,
Because
mm,
you figure out how to get things done in these large organizations, the internal politics, the internal mechanisms, and you don't want to draw the wrong lessons or wrong conclusions from what works in those places because of their unique situation, unique culture.
mm,
And so unlearning, number one. And I would say the second biggest one is the speed of
mm,
decision making and the speed of moving.
mm,
I think, and I'm generalizing, but big companies, that is not their thing. That is not
mm,
their. And so I had to both consciously unlearn and remind everyone every day that if there is one weapon we have that
mm,
is disproportionately in our favor is speed.
mm, mm,
And
mm,
I think when you are running 8,000, 10,000 person organization with 100 plus product portfolio, you are trying to manage a massive kind of a battleship or oil tanker
mm,
or whatever your analogy is. And
mm.
you are not wired to turn on a dime, make decisions like move. I think when you're in a startup, if your mindset is that, that's your death. Like you cannot run like
Yeah.
that. So I would say that is probably the single biggest, the speed slash kind of the speed with which you can actually make decisions, get organizational to flip and rally is
Mm,
very different in a startup.
mm, 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 mm. Eh, so right now, this so many people are spending so much time on AI. Almost seems like all AI wisdom has been democratized and like everybody knows everything. Also because these systems are so easy to use, like um, writing a prompt on one end can take a lot of sophistication, but on the other hand, it's just English. Anybody could write anything. Do you feel like there's specific insights or skills or knowledge that you and your team have that's hard to find outside? Um,
On core AI stacks, you mean?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
No, I mean, I'll try to answer it in maybe two levels. One is more
Yeah.
typeface, and maybe one more broadly. I would love to hear your like what I think is happening with these democratization of knowledge and access and
Mm,
systems. And we talk a lot about that.
mm,
Maybe let's start there. I do think there is an interesting paradox building where everyone will have access to these systems. They're getting easier
mm,
and easier to use. But I sometimes use the kind of the Formula One analogy. When you get a massively powerful engine like a Formula One car,
mm,
it takes a level of precision and craft and learning to really know how to steer it correctly.
mm, mm, mm.
And
Yeah.
yes, with automotives, when automotive technology got democratized to a level in developed markets, then everyone could access it. It certainly had a big quality of life impact and lots of industries changed.
Mm,
But it still doesn't change the fact that mastering the full power of these extremely advanced systems
mm,
takes, whether it's the Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours or whatever the agentic AI equivalent of that is going to be, uh,
mm,
is steering and controlling these systems to really get the every last ounce of their power out. I think
mm,
that steerability is going to be the biggest skill set thing in the long run. And I'll bring to typeface. In fact, I know
mm,
there's a lot of debate in the kind of students who are studying now is computer science dead and programming, no
mm,
programming jobs and all these things. We'll see. I do think the core programming jobs will shift.
mm,
My prediction is steerability and controllability of these AI systems and model will become an extremely valuable skill.
mm,
And
mm,
those who
mm,
know how to do that in increasingly more precise ways, everyone will be
mm,
able to do basic things probably equally well. But then the question
mm,
is
mm,
that differentiation comes in knowing how to control, how to steer, how to actually
mm,
get the best outcomes.
mm,
And so then bridging to typeface, if you think about what we are doing in our engineering systems, we are not building a foundation model. I mean, we use 20 to 25 different models for different modalities, different vendors. So our skill for our customers is really two things: bringing extremely high value context, as I said, and
mm,
marrying that context seamlessly with these powerful AI platforms, number one.
mm,
But then, second, is building workflows and tools to steer those AI platforms
mm,
to be not just globally intelligent and powerful, but extremely narrow intelligence in the domain of our customer. And so I think
mm, mm,
the skill that hopefully we are building in our products and in our organization is the extreme discrimination ability with these AI platforms to make
mm,
them not forget their global knowledge, but really become hyper specialized in deep knowledge in deep domains, which is back to the context. So that's really what we are. I mean, in a nutshell, if you look inside our code and product, is we take globally compressed knowledge bases in these platforms. We layer a domain and customer specific context on top,
Mm,
and we ask and steer and try to control these models to speak in extremely refined, narrow domains that they were not
mm,
originally trained on. They were trained on global
mm,
knowledge. We are trying
mm,
to essentially almost make them focus and narrow train. And so that
mm,
steerability is probably the skill, I think, broadly,
mm,
Amit, that companies like Typeface and then even professionals are going to have to. I do think the jobs that will get displaced, the new jobs will emerge of people who know how to actually steer and get the best out of these systems.
mm, mm. And like, I think every massively successful company is often built on some counterintuitive beliefs. Is there is there something that you believe that you find other people don't subscribe into, but that unique way of thinking?
Yeah, I don't know if it's counterintuitive or not. I'll give you two beliefs we have. And
Yeah.
I think I don't know necessarily, and as you know, with these things, maybe it was
Mm,
counterintuitive at one point, and at one point it becomes conventional wisdom. And so the question is,
yeah.
where really on that cycle did you catch it? Uh,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
but I would say two things that we deeply believe. One, that as all these digital technologies become ever more powerful, and AI just represents the next kind of version of
Mm,
it,
mm, mm,
the very human analog creative expression of being able to
mm,
tell your story uniquely in your brand voice, if you're a
mm,
company as a brand, but even as an individual. I think the one counterintuitive belief we definitely have is the more the world becomes digitized and automated and AI, this is back to your slop comment,
mm,
the more value the society at large and businesses and brands will put on the uniquely analog human storytelling. And by the way,
mm,
that's
mm,
not
mm,
even limited to just typeface. Like, I do
mm,
think the notion of highly well curated physical events are going to become even
mm,
more valuable 10 years from now
mm,
than they are today. Lots of people say, oh, if in a world where everything is moving to Zoom and all these is physical interaction. I think the counterintuitive thing is the more powerful these AI systems become, the
mm,
more of a premium we will place as society on people who
mm,
can really hone in the craft of that human
mm,
storytelling. And by the way, this was back to what I was saying earlier about the
mm,
Formula One. There are only 20 people in the world who get to the place where they can harness the full power of these engines.
mm,
So I think that may be counterintuitive, that I think it's the human creative storytelling will become more valuable even as products like Typeface become more and more capable to automate more and more of your marketing.
mm,
And so
mm,
the reason that is important to us, that translates directly into what product pillars are we investing in, which is
mm,
even as we embrace these AI platforms,
mm,
the workflows we are building are simultaneously trying to hold a contradiction. Bring the power
mm,
of AI systems in our product, but then let the human actually express their creativity at the right moments in our workflow,
mm.
because
Yeah.
that's what's going to separate the AI slop where everyone says the same thing versus the output you create
Yeah.
using our product is different. I'll give you one last thing. I know I'm talking for a while, but this is a funny anecdote. Our own product, when we were using internally,
Mm,
and this tells you, you would think, oh, maybe the some of the PhDs in AI ML systems or people who are working on our software on the ML research side would be the best at getting the best output using our product. And turns out what happened in our early days, we have a very junior person in our India team, and
mm,
her job is nothing to do with, her job is not even software related directly.
yeah.
Um, and she emerged and became one of our most prolific, like she could get the best outputs of our product versus any AI ML person we have.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
we were
yeah,
like,
yeah,
and by the way, it became a phrase internally almost. How
yeah,
come, I don't want to name her but how come she can get this output from the exact same software, but these other people can't? And so that told me something, which is it's not as straightforward as, oh, even the people who know how these LLM systems work and they built it, yet they cannot get the best creative output from this software. And here's a person who probably has no idea about the internal weights and tuning and fine tuning, but she figured out how to iterate with these AI systems and actually get the best output.
yeah, 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 yeah. It's like the best brain surgeons are not necessarily the best at interpersonal
Exactly, exactly.
dynamics, right? So, yeah. Oh, this is a lot of fun, and this is something I spend a lot of my day thinking about as well. Where do you see the next few years your space evolving um, as newer, smarter models come in?
Yeah,
What?
I'll talk a little bit about our space, but I would love to hear your thoughts on more broadly what are you seeing as well,
Yeah.
like you're thinking about it. But look, I think, I mean, and the fun part of this journey is we all think about it, but then you have to adapt to actually how things are playing
Yeah.
out. So it may not happen like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's kind of a little bit like kind of protein folding. There's so many combinations possible that you don't
Yeah.
really know. But let me just say some parts are clearer than others. The clearer
Mhm.
trajectories, I would say, is I think we are kind of just, at least in our world, marketing AI, we are entering what I would call a second clear chapter. So your
Mm,
first chapter was you had this basic natural language based user experience paradigm that ChatGPT
mm,
brought. You had underlying model that didn't have a lot of memory and reasoning, but it had enough prompt
mm,
based ability where you
mm,
could interact with it in a natural way. I think the real
mm,
breakthrough in that first wave was a very natural, intuitive interaction style.
mm,
In the same way Google search box did for the web, you essentially had a extremely high density knowledge that you could interact with just plain language. I think
mm,
that was the
mm,
breakthrough. The second chapter, I do think, is context, memory, and reasoning. I think
mhm,
it's increasing amounts of, and obviously it depends on the models getting powerful and the underlying compute
mm,
stacks getting bigger and cheaper,
mm,
all that. But I think we are entering this agentic reasoning phase very much so where you're no longer asking these systems just do one command at a time and kind of it's a little bit like the first generation Siri or Alexa where they were mildly interesting but more frustrating often than not because if you try to really use them, you quickly realize it was not very productive. And so I think we're
mm,
entering a second phase where these AI systems are learning now to have memory,
mm,
how to reason over that memory,
mm,
and essentially do much more long duration choreographies based on
mhm,
kind of that
mm,
reasoning
mm,
and memory. So I think that is a fascinating change in our world where we
mm,
now have built these five or six marketing agents, end-to-end
mm,
agents, where
mm,
they can literally mimic what
mm,
for example, a email marketer would do, where
mm,
you give them a marketing goal in the abstract, they will go
mm,
do market research, they will do reasoning, then they'll come up with a marketing campaign idea, they'll throw out
mm,
16 different ideas to you, and once you pick
mm,
one of the ideas, they will create the entire campaign choreography, generate emails, generate web pages,
mm,
generate. So I think the sheer orchestration and the reasoning capabilities that these systems are now starting to get, by the way, and then all of that combined with things like MCP where you can orchestrate existing systems, which I know you have thought a lot about how
mm,
to bridge this AI world with legacy systems because that also
mm,
matters a lot. I think
mm,
that is the chapter we are in right now where
mm,
interoperability with existing systems resulting in more memory and reasoning, and
mm,
then resulting in more interesting orchestration capabilities for these agents. That's kind of the
mm.
world we are in right now.
Yeah.
I think the next chapter where it goes, for us at least, in marketing, is once you have ability to orchestrate at scale, you're
Mm,
able to generate tremendous amounts of data and content. And then the closed loop performance and analytics of how do you now use these AI systems to analyze massive amounts of data. and use that as a closed loop self-optimizing system. I think that right now we are in a little bit of a linear orchestration phase of AI agents, where you give them a goal, they reason, they come up with a set of orchestrations, and they can execute them. I think the next phase is you go from a straight line orchestration to a closed loop orchestration, because it's going to be then a whole bunch of optimization learning functions.
Yeah, yeah,
And then these agents are essentially truly not only doing the upstream creation orchestration, they're actually doing in effect a continuous closed loop optimization loop. So
yes,
that's going to be a fascinating next phase, number one. And number two is then what is the role of human creativity in that closed loop? Because right
yeah,
now, it's much easier to insert human in the loop in the current orchestration systems, because I can say after every step, the human can review, approve, move it to the next step. Once you get to these true closed loop systems, how do you then, and by the way, self-driving cars are kind of an interesting analogy in this, right? Because you have so much data that they're accumulating from the real-time driving, they're accumulating all that computer vision, video analysis, they're feeding that back in, and then you have to do user experience breakthroughs. How does a user take control of the system? How does the user provide feedback to guide the system to do the right things when needed? Because if it goes wrong, it can be fatal. Now, obviously, in self-driving or in healthcare, the consequences are very fatal. I don't think in marketing it's that. But I think to me, the closed loop and a user experience breakthrough on how humans then inject themselves in that closed loop system is going to be the next wave in my mind, at least for marketing. But what are you seeing? I know you are talking about it a lot.
So I think maybe I'm saying some of the very similar things that you're saying, but I'll tell you the way I'm thinking about it, which is maybe slightly different. So this ChatGPT moment or this like LLM moment has become possible because 20 years ago we got internet and we incentivized people to put a lot of information digitally, right? And over 20 years we accumulated enough content that and other breakthroughs had to happen for us to be able to train on it. But that data is a critical part of it.
Yeah.
And that data has been mostly what I would call declarative knowledge. Right? Like you mostly write things that are just fact and opinions, right? The thing that's been missing from that data for the most part is procedural knowledge. Like, how do I do my job as an engineer? How do I do my job as a marketer? How do I do my job as a salesperson? And that data isn't there in the internet corpus yet. And that's why the models struggle to do the jobs. Like we're trying to artificially craft for them, which are the workflows. It says do this, then do this, then do this, then do this. And sometimes they can kind of self-correct based on looking at the output, which is the whole React loop. But fundamentally, we we are writing workflows like we were writing software in procedures, in deterministic procedures with branching and a little bit of feedback. But once you have enough rich data on this procedural stuff, then the models will get much better at doing and performing tasks. And that stuff is slowly happening because now that we are asking the models to do the tasks, they're generating their own data, and then humans are providing feedback. And so it'll take a little bit of time to build that procedural knowledge. Some of that knowledge is being accumulated by foundation model companies by paying billions of dollars to human raters, but some of that will naturally evolve as these applications get more and more useful. And that's when I feel like the next breakthrough will happen.
That's fascinating. No, I agree. That's fascinating. I mean, the way you frame the procedural aspect, it's interesting to think about. I will say you said something that sparked as more and more these agentic systems take hold, even in their primitive form. And
Yeah,
however the
yeah,
procedural knowledge was codified, as
yeah.
they work and get some things right, some things wrong, and the user
Mm,
will correct, that corpus of all those billions of agent interactions also becomes, and this is starting to happen in customer support domain, by the way. You
yeah,
basically see all these agents trying to do these customer interaction calls, and that data is the most valuable data to feed back into the feedback loop that I was talking. So,
Yeah.
and I know you spend a lot of time thinking about also integrations. I do think systems like MCP will also eventually generate enough interaction data
Yeah.
of how systems and these workflows talk to each
Mm,
other to
mm, mm.
codify a lot of procedural knowledge.
Yeah. But the other thing that's very fascinating to me is the human aspect of it as well. So, like every new generation of technology has made easier for knowledge and information to flow,
Yeah.
right? Like telephony and internet. And and this is like the next level of it, where expertise can flow from one human to another. And this is one of the places where we at my current company Amp Up are investing is can we learn what the best salesperson do and teach that to everybody else so that everybody's performance elevates. So it's not just models getting better, it can kind of be the connective tissue
I
between
agree.
humans as well so that expertise can flow a lot more easily. Earlier, all you could do was write a blog post or a manual that somebody else could read, but now you can really encode your brain into something that you
And do
can
you
give to
think,
somebody else.
no, that's a fascinating way of framing. You're kind of framing it somewhat differently than what I was saying earlier, where the counterintuitive thing in my mind is that expertise and the human that will become the premium. The question though is, like you're saying, either it could flow freely or people will realize that is actually what needs a commercial construct around, and all these talent marketplaces, and like you have seen early rudimentary pre-AI forms of that, right, with
Yeah,
different
yeah,
communities and where you sell your expertise kind of at a certain commercial
yeah,
construct. And the question will be, I do agree with you that knowledge transfer and knowledge transactionality will emerge as part of these AI systems. I think it's not clear to me whether that will just become egalitarian where everyone just has like, if you take that, you take your example, if you somehow codified the world's 100 best salespeople, what they do,
mhm,
if you could do it, they are probably not going to want you to just give it to everyone. They are probably going to
y-
say, especially salespeople, they are going to want
yeah,
their pound of flesh from that if they are going to give
yeah,
you that. So it will be interesting to see what's the commercial
yeah.
societal
So
model that emerges around it.
I think different incentive structures will definitely show up. So on one hand, let's say you're a mega corporation and like 1% of your
Yeah.
salespeople are outperforming everybody else.
Yeah, that I can see. Yeah,
You,
that I can
you
see.
would want to capture
Yes.
that and give it to everybody else,
Yes.
right? The other way that I've thought about it is that, like, let's say 100 years ago, you wanted to get entertained. You wanted to see something like a play or music or something. Your best option was to go to the local theater and whatever your best local artist can do, that's what you could do, right? And as a result, there were lots of local artists that could thrive. And once the mass media came in, where like somebody creating something in Hollywood flows to everywhere in the world, all of a sudden you want to get
Yeah.
entertained. There's a $2 billion production for $4 coming to your living room. And so that makes it harder. That makes it a lot more winner takes all kind of a situation where few people are like 100 million, 100 millionaires, and there are lots of struggling artists who are just waiting the tables in order to get to that thing. I wonder if something like this could happen to all professions. Um, but at the same time, once you do that, then there's a lot more possibility of people finding their niches.
Yeah,
Like,
I was going to say that's kind of the YouTube is the counterpoint in some ways, right? Where people
yeah,
find their long tail niche audience that you could never do before.
yeah,
You're
yeah,
right. Not
yeah,
everyone figures out how to monetize that
yeah,
or
yeah,
not
yeah,
monetize at a scale that matters.
yeah.
But at least
But
the platform is there.
yeah, I think all the kind of abundance aside, which will make like what we consider privilege today maybe gets available to everybody else, but we'll still play those social games where like we're trying to get ahead in some way,
Yeah.
right? And and over there, it seems like anything that is like routine that like could be defined and just needs to be
Yeah,
done goes away, right? So
I agree.
everybody would have to work on finding new innovative
Which,
ways
by the
of.
way, it's a great place to maybe, you said it better. I agree. It will be gut wrenching, by the way, when it goes
Yeah.
through that process. But if the end result is that as a collective we have up leveled the craft and the expression, and hopefully all of us then as a it benefits all of us rather than everyone
Yeah.
just being stuck at the least common denominator.
Yeah. 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 Definitely. Uh, yeah. We I had a completely different conversation planned, and we've gone in different direction, which is a lot more fun and interesting. But maybe to bring it back a little bit to now, one of the things that I see everyone struggle with is the gap between the what we could all see as a vision and where the ground realities are. And a lot of enterprises starting off with ambitious pilots and failing.
Yeah.
Like there's that infamous MIT research that says 90% of them are failing, and you had some interesting thoughts around it. What do you think is going on? What could people do better?
Yeah, look, there's been a lot of conversation as you alluded, so I don't want to kind of spend a lot of time on. It's very clear that the gap between the expectation or the hype or the C-level desire to adopt AI versus the actual capacity in the organization and the kind of that is clearly, I think there is a moment of kind of truth or reckoning, whatever you want to call it, that every workflow, every industry is going to go through.
Mm,
And so I do think that's very much a real issue. We see that. I do see, though, some really good examples of people who are doing it, in my opinion, the right way to avoid that pitfall. And maybe that
mm,
it's better to spend time on that. But everyone is talking about the issue of a part of it.
mm,
I think there are two things at least so first of all, in our business also, we saw that. We saw a distinct shift in year one. There were a lot of pilots. People wanted to kind of just try things out. And they were even willing to pay a lot of money for it, but they didn't
mm,
really have the ROI lens really focused. Like, what exactly am
mm,
I going to get out of this for my business long term?
mm,
I think the two distinct shifts we are starting to see, which are for the good, and one we are still seeing companies struggle with that they have to solve. The one shift is at least some of the larger enterprise customers we work with. We don't
mm,
work with a lot of small companies, but they are very much getting the ROI kind of a filter either forced on them after dabbling for a year or so, and they're like, no,
mm,
I have to figure out what is this can't just be some abstract productivity gain kind of a statement
mm,
with a co-pilot. Is this going to actually increase my revenue? Is this going to improve my customer retention? Like, what is the metric that I'm going to measure against which I
mm,
consider this? So I think, to
mm,
me, that is actually a good shift where there is a
mm,
real hard, doesn't matter whether it's AI or cloud or mobile. At the end of the day, businesses have to have a way to measure, is this going to make
mm,
me more either money by acquiring new customers faster, or is this going to make actually my current customers more happier and stay with us longer? Or so that change we are starting to see, Amit, very clearly at
mm,
the kind of economic level. The change, or the thing I would say, if I were to kind of observe the companies that have successfully deployed at least our solution versus companies that struggle, I've
mm,
seen two patterns emerge. One, it is not enough for the C level to just say we must adopt AI, mandate it on the organization, and then go away and 6 months later be shocked like when nothing has happened. Like, you really have to be in the trenches and the details,
mm,
at least through the initial phases of driving that change,
mm,
because the
mm,
organization will need a lot of exec support on breaking
mm,
processes, breaking org
mm,
silos. Otherwise, everyone will get this powerful new tool. And then
mm,
people will be like, yeah, but that's not how we do current business. My job is
mm,
only one half of it. Your job is the other half. So now nobody's going to do it. So I would say, if you are a C level person trying to drive this change,
mm,
mandates are not enough. I think you
mm,
have to actually be a participant in
mm,
driving. That is where we have seen CMOs or executive, in our case CMOs, because we sell to
mm,
marketers,
mm,
actually get involved in that detail. They actually
mm,
do get some real ROI. And by the way, once the flywheel starts where organization sees the results, then you don't need to stay, like, then it will take hold. Then you don't need to kind
mm,
of push it uphill. But initially, you're going
mm,
to have to. And then second thing is pick a narrow use case. See, this is where the AI hype doesn't help because everyone
mm,
says, oh, entire world's GDP will increase by this much, the entire labor market will shift overnight. And those broad proclamations don't really help in saying, no, no, let's start with a crawl, walk, run. Let's pick one use case, let's actually deliver. And that first
mm,
use case may not seem earth shatteringly ambitious,
mm, mm, mm,
but you gotta. So I would say a very narrow use case focus with a deep sponsorship on an operational level by
mm,
the C
mm,
team is at least what I have seen.
mm,
Avoid the trap of pilot hell. By the way, you mentioned the
mm,
MIT study. We also recently did a study with all the marketers and published a research report. And
mm,
it's very clear almost 60% of them said they do expect they have to adopt these AI tools and it will drive more efficiency and spend.
mm,
But more than 75% also said they don't yet have the playbook to go beyond the pilots to these mainstream kind of how to deploy these at scale.
mm, 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 mm. One theory that I have around it is that, let's say that you're designing a new database or you're designing a new file system. There's 30 years of theory, and you sprinkle your requirements and you do a good job of designing, you do a review, and then somebody goes and writes the code. It, the initial version will have some problems. You'll write some tests, do some load testing, but like pretty soon, if you've done a good job of designing, your thing will work. It's kind of like the architect mindset, right? The closer the interface goes to like the messy human world, nothing works as designed, right? And really have to have that gardener mindset of like doing lots and lots of experiments, planting lots of seeds, seeing which ones grow, and then figure out how to turn that into beautiful bouquets and stuff. And that takes a different kind of mindset, very iterative,
Yeah.
fast learning loop mindset. And also takes a certain level of persistence and determination from top all the way down to say that I'm going to make this successful even if it takes 50 iterations. And I'm going to actually plan for like 20, 30 iterations, which means each iteration has to be
Yeah.
like very small. And I think a lot of people approached it in more of like the architect mindset that like, here's my grand vision. Let me go hire a big five consulting firm, tell them to go build it, and they'll come back and it's gonna work beautifully. The other thing that I see is that there's a lot of knowledge, like going back to this procedural knowledge, right? It's there in people's head. It's not anywhere else. So
Yeah.
the
Not
only
qualified.
way, yeah, the only way you can make it successful is if those people are participating and they have the right incentive to participate with you, right? Like because they've got their own jobs to be done. Their job definition is not make AI pilots successful. The few people who are super enthusiastic about the future and they
Yeah.
will jump in and give it, their extra 20% time. And there are few people who feel like this is their opportunity to learn and be the master of the future that's coming. But for everybody else, it's like additional nuisance on their head. And so I feel like these two factors play a very important
Yeah,
role.
no, that's great. Both are interesting. I think on the second one, I will give you a little bit just one thought that I'm
Mm,
curious to see how it plays out. I do agree that extracting that knowledge that's baked, like, and you cannot create enough incentives. I know the big platform companies can hire people and like ask them to, and yeah, they'll do it up to a point, but it will never reach a true kind of scale point by doing that
mm,
way.
mm,
I do think one of the more fascinating moments, I'm curious about how it plays out, is when the AI crosses from pure digital realm. You were talking about the
mm,
procedural thing, but a lot of our interactions are still in the physical world with physical systems.
mm,
And once you get these systems to actually be capable of taking the data and the signals from the physical world, where
mm,
a human may just keep going about doing their thing the way they are doing. So they don't actually have to
mm,
do something particularly different to teach the AI system. But if
mm,
the AI actually system has become more ambient enough where it's baked into, it's a little bit like what happened with smartphones, right?
mm,
Because once the fabric is there so that the human users will just keep doing their job the way they are doing, you're not asking them
mm,
to teach these systems to do something, but you may be able to just extract so much physical, environmental, contextual data
mm,
that I think that's going to be the kind of the dam breaking moment where the way we are going to learn the codified procedural knowledge, at least in certain jobs, by the way, especially in
mm,
the industrial, maybe the information heavy jobs are different,
mm,
that I don't think you're going to ever get that knowledge codified by asking those people to train the AI systems, but
mm,
rather you are going to get the AI systems baked transparently inside
mm,
environments where people are just going about doing their jobs
mm, mm,
and it will just work. I mean, it's kind of
mm,
like the autonomous driving is kind of that experience, right now, where the
mm,
human will just have to keep driving the cars.
mm,
And up to a point, this system will slowly and steadily start acquiring more and more of the signal.
mm. Very interesting. Yeah, it's going to be a very interesting next few years to see what happens. I want to switch gears a little bit and get into more of a personal domain in the last 5, 10 minutes.
Yeah.
I- If there's like, if let's say you had the platform to kind of tell the whole world like one piece of wisdom that you feel like will make in general people better, what what advice would you give? And it doesn't necessarily have to be your own. If somebody gave you a piece of advice that you feel was extremely valuable to you, that
Yeah, that's a pretty deep and open question. I don't, because that, and you're not even limiting to, you use the word wisdom, which is a
mm,
pretty, so I'm not, first of all, I will start by saying I'm not sure. It certainly is not something I would say as my distilled wisdom. Like I'm sure I'm not at that point. So it would by
mm,
definition have to be something I've heard from others or gotten from
mm,
others. I and maybe this is still more in the professional realm slash what we are
mm,
talking about because there are lots of other
mm,
domains in life.
mm,
Um,
mm, mm,
but I will say, I think for me, the thing that resonates the most for me and continues to, and we have touched upon it few times. I think this notion of kind of this, whether it's the Japanese word for it, which is shoshin, or which
mhm,
is kind of the beginner's mind. I do think certainly in the professional realm, but I actually think even in the personal realm,
mm,
having both the humility and the mindset of being able to start all over again. And that gets
mm,
harder and harder as you just go through life because there's just so many experiences you are
mm,
acquiring.
mm,
And there is almost even a weird AI parallel to what we were just talking about. The more and more you embed these AI systems with all the knowledge, the biases are going to also start getting baked in because they are just going
yeah.
to learn so much from that. I think for me, the ability to unlearn and relearn,
Mhm, mm,
I think it is one of the most unique human traits.
mm,
And I think over time we lose more and more. I mean, I think we just, I think the arc of life, I think we lose most of it as we go through it.
mm,
And if you
mm,
can try to stay close to, like, I know, like, I don't know if you're a big physical fitness guy. My wife is. But anyway, there's this whole VO2 max. Like, what is your oxygen
mhm,
holding capacity?
yeah,
I
yeah,
wonder if somebody had come up with a VO2 max equivalent measure for your
yeah,
learning capacity. And if
yeah,
you all
yeah,
had a number on every day that you could look at, and it will warn you that you are now kind of saturating and not really learning new things. I think for me is that maintaining my learning VO2 max higher is kind of maybe the thing I would say.
I heard this on another podcast with one of the IDEO guys. He gave this a term called Vuja Day, which is the exact opposite of deja vu.
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah, actually, that's a cool interesting. things that you have not seen before that you have to be able to pattern match
Being
it.
able to see things that are familiar
Yeah,
in kind of a new
yeah,
way.
that's actually cool. Yeah, that's a cool. I'll use that.
This is a weird question, but I like to ask it to people. And again, I borrowed it from somebody else named Kevin Kelly. So most of us were a little awkward growing up as a child or a teenager, right? And if you manage to keep that awkwardness, it often becomes your superpower. I'll tell you mine. I grew up as younger of two brothers, younger by a lot. So everybody treated me like a kid. And so I had this strong urge to show up as like grown up.
Yeah.
And so I would go and say weird things that I had heard other adults say in different adult gatherings, and that caused huge amount of embarrassment for everybody. And now what that means is that I don't get easily embarrassed, and this become my superpower. What would be your superpower that used to feel awkward before?
Well, I don't know if I even remember. I probably viscerally remember all the things I feel awkward about now rather than the things I don't know that I have a actually that's a good I, I don't actually I'm not sure I don't think this fits exactly what you're asking, but I think at least in certain context being deeply kind of passionate about, like you can use the geek word, like the passionate about technology or the I think, and maybe it's just the professional and the current contextual world I live in the valley with people like you. Like maybe it's more contextual. I think it may still be something seen as awkward, but I think it's also cyclical, right? Sometimes what used to be seen as, but I don't think I have a good answer for you. I will say maybe that this is the right answer. I think about this is not awkwardness about me, but you were also asking about the wisdom. I'm going to cross a little bit into because this is the personal part you said. I'm a big mechanical watch. Like I love the craft and this
Mm,
kind of again at the intersection. Anyway, one of the most talented watchmakers currently alive is a fellow named Max Buser. I don't know if you know
mm,
him, yeah, but anyway, he's super talented, and he has a
mm,
watch company. He makes amazing watches that I'm a huge fan. Anyway, but he has a phrase that resonates a lot for me in the vein of what you just said, which is a creative adult is a child who survived, uh, basically. And
Yeah,
the only point he's making is for you to stay creative, you just have to maintain that.
yeah, yeah.
And so I think it's maybe not the awkwardness, but I think it's probably actually preserving all
Mm,
of the good and the bad and that's full circle back to the beginner's mind for me.
yeah, 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 yeah. Right. Last question of the episode. Um, If you had to give a TED talk, which is on a topic that most people will not associate with you, what would that be? So it can't be about being an entrepreneur,
No, yeah, yeah.
engineer.
No, I wouldn't even want to I'm not sure I would want to. I think I will give you maybe two different topics, and maybe if I'm interpreting your question correctly, is topics that I have personal passion for. That
Yeah, yeah.
I'll give you one in personal domain and one in somewhat not professional, but in a mission
Mm,
oriented domain. I think the
mm,
personal domain I kind of touched on it. I think I would say kind of how mechanical watches can tell us kind of the human kind of the creative story. So I think I would do something about mechanical watches. That's something I'm very passionate about. That's really more on the
mm,
passion side. But I would say
mm,
maybe the thing I would say is it's health and
mm,
the digital biology and what's happening in that world is a
mm,
topic of immense personal interest. And I don't know if this fits your question of, I don't think most people would attach that to what I'm doing right now. But
mm,
that's an area I spend a lot of time reading, researching, and I love that domain. Just there's just so much,
mm,
and it has a very deep mission orientation around if you can actually impact
mm.
lives. I mean, yes, what you and I do is interesting, but it's not the same as actually impacting directly somebody's lives in a viscerally real sense. So that would be what I would focus on.
Very cool. It's been an incredible episode. I learned so much. I feel like I got a masterclass. Uh,
I learned a lot. I'm going to think about some of your procedural knowledge and lots of interesting things you said that I need to go now think through.
it's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much,
Thanks for
and
having
hope
me.
to have you again. Yeah.
Thanks.
Right. Thank you.